Compounders, Brad here. So today I want to talk about how I find sustainability stocks with big potential returns. Okay. Now, this isn't a topic I've heard much talked about on YouTube. And just recently I announced that, I'm very interested in kind of environmental sustainability, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, really the transition to a low carbon economy, a low carbon society. And so one of the things I've been wanting to do is, figure out how do I find individual companies that are aligned with those same values, who are working to create this transition from a high carbon society we have now to a low carbon society, really the transition to a sustainable future. Okay. So the first thing I did is I reached out to this guy, Kerry Krasinski. He is at Yale University. He's a lecturer there. He's also the executive director of the Network for Sustainable Financial Markets. So he seemed like a great person to reach out to. So I sent him a message. I was like, all right, Kerry, I'm trying to find smaller public companies that have these high ESG scores. Environment, social governance scores, right? Socially responsible companies. And really, I reached out to him wanting to know, what funds he knew of who kind of shared this ethos for investing in these kinds of companies. And what he sent back, he didn't send me a fund, but he sent me back this report, okay? The IPRIO ESG Leaders Report. Companies most favored by socially responsible investors. And essentially what this report did is it looked at what companies are owned by ESG funds, okay? And then it compiled lists. All right, so the first list, and this was done in fall 2018, by the way. The first list, top 100 companies most widely held by ESG funds. So most of these are going to be the large cap stocks, right? The big boys. I wasn't so interested in that because I don't have huge amounts of capital, right? I'm not limited to just the largest companies in the world. And I think, I'm going to find potentially greater return opportunities in small cap stocks because, institutional investors, the bigger investors aren't necessarily playing in that arena. So there's more potential for mispricings. So let's look at this next list, which is a lot more interesting to me. Top 100 companies by percent shares outstanding held in ESG funds. Okay, so wrap your head around that. Let's look at the first example here. Amiad Water Systems in Israel. 19.5% of the shares outstanding were held by ESG funds. Okay. Now, when we look at the companies where you've got the largest percentage of shares outstanding held by ESG funds, you're naturally going to get smaller companies. Okay. So there's 100 companies here. So what I did is I created this list. I reproduced this list in an Excel file. And I wanted to use one more filter. Okay, so let's pull that up. So we're looking at top 100 companies by shares outstanding owned by ESG funds. What I did here was I added a couple columns, but the big one is VIC. Okay, was there a write-up in Value Investors Club? And for those of you who followed me for a while, I'm big on Value Investors Club. These are very smart investors who have submitted an investment thesis on each of these companies, okay? And it shows when that thesis was submitted. Obviously, I give preference to the more recent submissions. So that's what I did. I've got a list of the 100 companies here. And out of the 100, 24 had write-ups, okay? There were 8 that had short write-ups. So the investor who wrote up a thesis for that company, believed that the company was the price was going to go down. Okay, they were kind of betting against that company. So for the other 16, there were long write-ups. So these write-ups are sorted by most recent to, all the way back to December 2006. And, really what I wanted to do is kind of pare it down from these 100 investment ideas to a handful. And so that's what I did. And the way I did that is I looked at the Value Investors Club write-up, and I wanted to find out, all right, what is fair value? What is the intrinsic value estimate for this company by the person who wrote this write-up? And how does that compare? How does the intrinsic value, according to this investor, compare to what the price is today? Okay, not the price when the report was written, but the price today. And the idea there is, I want to look for companies with the largest delta between current price and what a smart investor thought it was worth, relatively recently. So you can see here, Georgia Capital PLC, which is traded on the London Stock Exchange. Current price versus the net asset value, there's a 56% upside for this company. The current price, the current net asset value, or the net asset value at the time that this write-up was done in April 2020, is 56% higher than the price today on December 15th, 2020. So, I did that for eight of these top ideas. I didn't do this South Korean company because I can't buy South Korean stocks at this time. I can't do it through Interactive Brokers, and I don't know how to do it through any broker. This top one here is fairly valued. So the price today is, very close to what this investor thought it was worth only a couple months ago. So I'm not going to take a look at companies that are fairly valued. I only want to look at companies, again, where there's a decent upside, right? So Georgia Capital fits the bill. I'm going to dig into that one. 56% upside. We've got bacafrost, okay? That's traded on the Oslo exchange, with a potential 76% upside. All right, so that's pretty impressive. And again, I'm not taking any of this at face value. I'm simply doing this percent upside just to decide which companies I want to dive into. I'm not just assuming that this fair value is correct. I want to see if I can understand the business, value it myself, and then see if there's still, if I understand it, if there's still a decent spread between what it's worth and what the price is. Next one from Sweden, it's basically fairly valued. It's gone up quite a bit since this write-up here. Wellbuilt is a U.S. company, the first U.S. company on the list here, and 55% potential upside from Wellbuilt. Now, this Europris out of Norway, it did more than a double in the last 2 years. I think it's like the equivalent of dollar stores in the U.S. So it's done very well in the last 2 years. So I'm not going to look at that one just because, it's run up so much. MSG Networks is a company I actually already own through my kind of test magic formula portfolio. But, there's a potential double there, according to this Value Investors Club report from May of 2018. Obviously, that's a little bit outdated, 2.5 years ago, but, it's on the magic formula screener. So clearly, it's trading at a discount, or at least as when you look at earnings yield, it's quite cheap in terms of price. So that's another one to look at. And finally, Hudson Technologies, okay, another U.S. company. So we've got 3 U.S. companies here, one out of the Faroe Islands and one out of the U.K. And the interesting thing about Hudson Technologies, I'm going to do this for all of them. What is the insider ownership? Insider ownership is one of the big metrics that I like to look for kind of early on in my investment screening process, because I want to make sure that the management's interests are aligned with my interests, okay? Because obviously management has the ability to, decide how the rewards of the business are either funneled to themselves or funneled to shareholders. And if management is also, a sizable shareholder, that just bodes well for our interests to be aligned. So those are the 5 from this IPRIO report. And so I'm going to be digging into those. Now I have one more column here, and that's corner of Berkshire and Fairfax. And this is really a measure of, are people on corner of Berkshire and Fairfax talking about this company, this potential investment idea? And 3 of these, the top 3, which are all, one is in the U.S. These first 3, there's no mention of on corner of Berkshire and Fairfax, which was a little disappointing. It's just another great resource for me to get insights into companies. People share, links, reports, thoughts about different investment opportunities. Really smart investors on there. MSG Networks has 9 pages of kind of messages going back and forth. So, say that's 90 messages back and forth over the years on MSG Networks. And then Hudson Technologies, I think, just has a few comments on the message boards. So that's the first kind of track I took to find potential companies that are, sharing my values, who want to see a transition to a low carbon future. The second source is a company I actually found through corner of Berkshire and Fairfax. So I posted on corner of Berkshire and Fairfax, I'm interested in ESG investing. I obviously don't want to sacrifice returns. I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want to find companies doing really amazing things, doing things that are aligned with this value that I have around sustainability. But of course, I want to look at them through the lens of a value investor, right? And I only want to buy if I have a substantial margin of safety. So really, I'm just looking for kind of a list of companies that fit that ethos of sustainability. And then I can see, all right, do I understand it? What is the margin of safety? So this second source here is an investment fund. It's a very small investment fund, just like $3 million under management. I think they've only been around for a couple of years, right? 2016 is when it was founded. And I found out about this, like I said, through the corner of Berkshire and Fairfax. They had done a podcast. It was like 30 minutes. I think I linked to that in a couple of videos ago. But it's really cool. I like how they're approaching sustainable investing. And I'll just read a little bit here. Founded so that investors could participate in a fundamental transition taking place within the industries that underpin our economy, right? So the world will make strides addressing climate change over the next decade. No industries will be more affected than those in the materials, energy, and heavy industrials sectors. Okay, so this company takes a little bit of a different track than a very different track than most ESG funds. Okay, most ESG funds are really just trying to avoid the polluters. Okay, to remove companies that don't fit their ESG model from their investment universe, right? So maybe avoiding tobacco companies, avoiding weapons manufacturers, avoiding heavy carbon emitters like oil companies, natural gas companies, things like that. But this company treats things a little bit differently. They're looking for companies without not looking at what they've done in the past in terms of polluting, okay? But what they're going to be doing polluting going forward. So it could be a company that has a terrible ESG score, right? Because they have all these carbon emissions, but the company has these plans to transition from this kind of fossil fuel-based model into a renewable energy-based model. And the company is also big on enablers of this transition from a high carbon economy to a low carbon economy. Enablers, for example, include a bunch of different mining companies, right? Copper miners, lithium miners. These materials that we don't have nearly enough of right now in terms of ramping up electric vehicle production. Like, we don't have enough of the elements to go into making batteries in order to quickly scale from these internal combustion engine vehicles that are predominant today to electric vehicles. Same with energy infrastructure. If you have a coal-fired power plant and you want to transition to wind or solar, we're going to need the basic elements that allow us to manufacture the wind turbines and the solar panels. So, Massif doesn't shy away from these companies that may be large carbon emitters, but they're going to enable this transition looking forward. So I think that's a key distinction here. Most ESG funds are backward looking. How have they done recently in terms of carbon emissions? Massif is looking forward. Are these companies going to lead us as we transition to a low carbon future? So I really resonate with the outlook by this company. So what I did was, you can see their letters to investors, right? So I read through the last 3 letters to investors, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter of 2020. And they talk a lot in these letters about what they're holding, right? Our 2 copper mining positions, Ivanhoe Mining, Turquoise Hill, junior lithium miner, Lithium America. So I read through the last 3 letters and I kind of compiled, all of those companies that they mentioned in their last 3 letters to investors. And there's 17 different companies that they mention. And I don't know if they're currently holding all of these, but you can see they've added a lot of them recently. These were added in March. There's new in quarter 3. These 3 guys, new in February, new in quarter 2. So, I think a good portion of these they probably currently own. And this was the best I could do because, they're managing less than 100 million. Like I said, they're managing around 3 million. So they don't have to file, they don't have to submit 13F filings to the SEC to show exactly what they're holding each quarter. So anyway, what I did here is I looked through each of these companies, same kind of process. Does it have a Value Investors Club write-up recently? And that's this column, VIC. And then same thing, corner of Berkshire and Fairfax. How much discussion is there about the company in corner of Berkshire and Fairfax? Which, like I said, is just another way to wrap your head around what the company does. Try to understand the company. And then similarly to this first spreadsheet, I try to figure out, well, what's the potential upside here? How does the price today compare to what the intrinsic value estimate was in this Value Investors Club write-up? So you see here Vestas Wind Systems, 14% upside. Yeah, it's hard for me to get too excited about that. Lumina Gold Corp, okay, a junior gold mining company, also copper mining in Ecuador. That was added in the third quarter, so not too long ago. There's a potential 40% upside there, okay? And I think it was actually Massive that did this write-up for Value Investors Club. So, yeah, potential 40% upside. So I'm going to dig into that one. RWE, which is a utility in Europe, used to be a very kind of coal-based utility, shifting towards renewables. They're doing a lot of offshore wind. They've made a number of acquisitions, and so they're really pretty aggressively, it seems, shifting from fossil fuel-based energy to renewable energy. And like I said, that was a buy in quarter 3 for Massive. There's no write-up, so I don't really know what Massive thinks it's worth, but they seemed pretty bullish on it, so I'm going to dig into it anyway, even though I don't have, this potential upside metric to look at yet. Polaris Infrastructure, fairly valued. I think that's gone up quite a bit since November 2018. Altius Minerals, 31% upside. Not quite as high as I'd like to dig deeper into that. Right, Kazatomprom. So this is interesting. A uranium miner. Okay, I think the world's largest uranium miner. So Massive's position on nuclear is that nuclear energy is going to be an important energy source for transitioning from this fossil fuel based economy that we mostly have to a low carbon economy. Obviously a little controversial there with nuclear. I'm not actually totally sure how I feel about nuclear yet. I need to kind of sit with that, maybe educate myself a little bit more, but a potential 50% upside there, so somewhat compelling. And Massive did I think it's like a 30-minute talk on YouTube about Kazatomprom, what their thesis is on that, if you guys are interested. Bacafrost. Now, this is the only one that was both owned by Massive and showed up in this first list, okay? Bacafrost. Again, 76% upside. So I'm definitely, this is one of the first ones I'm going to dig into is Bacafrost. So that was cool to see. Just one overlap there. And then we have Africa Oil. Now, I need to understand a little bit better why this shows up in Massive's portfolio as one of these transition companies. Based on what I've read, I haven't seen anything about renewables. So I have to learn more about this one. But, the VIC, intrinsic value, the value estimate for Africa Oil versus today's price, it is very compelling, guys. Like a 4x difference. I think it's like $1.20 stock price, Canadian dollars. And I think it could be worth, in the upper $4 range. So that one's going to be very exciting if I can understand why it belongs in a portfolio of someone who is wanting to vote with their dollars for this, transition towards a more low carbon future. So yeah, that's what I wanted to go through today, guys. I've got 9 companies that I'm excited to dive into. I want to learn more about them in terms of are they aligned with my values, with the world that I want to see us moving towards. Obviously, I have 2 kids. I think I've shared that on this channel before. And I am concerned. I'm concerned about the future, the world that they're going to inherit. I believe that climate change is very real, and I think the science really backs that up. I live in California, and it's very easy to see, pretty rapid climate change happening in just the handful of years that I've lived here, in terms of the frequency of wildfires, the summer temperatures. People never needed air conditioning before where I live in Oakland. And, I bought an air conditioner this year. Because, I have 2 kids, and it's pretty challenging when you're trying to get the kids to sleep and it's hot, and it's pretty much a nightmare. So we bought an air conditioner, and the point is, things are changing. Like, I know they're changing, and they're changing quickly, and I think it's just going to speed up the rate of change, and so I'm very concerned about that. And if there's anything I can do to aid that transition, I want to do it, and this is a place to do it through my investments, and not just my investments. Hopefully, some of you are going to be interested in this as well, and so. Whenever I make changes like this, it's easy to think, oh, it's just one person making a change. What difference is it really going to make? But I have a good friend, and, he's really into conservation and sustainability, and he would always think to himself, well, it's just one little thing, right? But every time I do this little thing, I imagine 50 other people are doing it too, right? And when you extrapolate that out, if you think, well, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 1,000, it starts to add up, right? So I don't really buy into, I'm just one person. What difference can I make? Because obviously I'm putting out videos on YouTube. You guys are watching them. So I have, this thing can scale, which is really awesome. Like, my values can scale. They can impact others and start to snowball, just like this channel is snowballing, just like the compound growth of an investment portfolio snowballs. I think when we speak our values, that can snowball as well. So, we're going to see where it goes. I'm going to keep you guys posted on what I find with these 9 potential investments. Hopefully there's a few that are compelling enough to put some money into. And you guys are going to hear a lot more about that in coming videos. So hopefully you're interested. Stay tuned if you are. Otherwise, that's all I got for you guys today. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.